Hi, Dr. Yass here. And today, this video is going to be another one of those videos that I'm performing to answer a question that was specifically provided by somebody who contacted me. In this case, it was through Facebook, but regarding that video I had made that indicated I'd be happy to perform videos that are specific to the questions of individuals so that they'll be able to have their specific questions answered versus the more generalized types of videos I do. I'm happy to do those videos, but it is also really nice for somebody who's not being able to get the answers to resolve their symptoms and the cause of their symptoms through the existing medical establishment. So to have an opportunity to speak specifically to those issues, I always think is really important, and it's kind of the primary reason I do this stuff. So in this case, we have Vicki, who's down in Australia, and she's asking a question about stretching. She had pain for years. It's actually a woman that I did a Zoom session with. Unfortunately, she had some symptoms. She was coerced basically by the medical establishment to think that there was a structural cause. She got a couple of surgeries. She ended up having the same symptoms as before the surgeries, and she came to the realization, well, then if that was the case, probably whatever the surgery was being designed to treat, the structural cause was not the cause of the pain, and she went on and started recognizing the cause was muscular, and we were able to address her issues, and she's doing tremendously well. But within our discussions, it became clear that there is a massive position of the medical establishment that when there is a muscular cause, that stretching is a critical component to somehow resolving shortening of muscles, and that this resolution is more of a long-term type of situation, which the reality is it's completely baseless to say that stretching can have any ability to create a long-term lengthening of a muscle. So she wanted me to do a video on what she described as demystifying stretching, when, how, and what to stretch, and when you should not stretch. How do you know when a muscle or tendon has been overstretched? What happens when you stretch an already overstretched muscle? And what causes that muscle to become overstretched in the first place? So I think the best thing to do is talk about the concept of stretching and what the theoretical presentation is that has people thinking that stretching is good and for the long term, and why in fact that's not true, and what the alternative really is that creates full flexibility of muscle. So generally people perceive stretching as a means of lengthening a muscle, and that in lengthening the muscle is more apt to be able to function properly. So a longer muscle is a good muscle. And I actually think that there are certain philosophies out there that consistently promote longer is better, longer is better, longer is better. So you always stretch a muscle. And that's where the confusion begins to lie. So we want to really just start off with, why would you need to stretch a muscle? Well, the perception is that a muscle is tight, and therefore, since it's tight, we need to lengthen it. So you have to step back and say, well, why would a muscle get tight? And quite simply, muscles work in pairs. So for instance, we have the bicep and the tricep, the front of the arm and the back of the arm. We have the quad and the hamstring, the front of the thigh and the back of the thigh, and they're connected to the elbow, they're connected to the knee. And so for instance, if we're looking, the bicep flexes the elbow and the tricep extends the elbow. So they pull directly opposite each other. They have forces that pull directly opposite each other. And if one muscle is stronger than its opposing muscle, that muscle will have a tendency to shorten. So for instance, the most common one here is the bicep is typically much stronger than the tricep, and as a result, the person who stands might stand with that elbow bent. They're unable to lengthen the elbow and straighten it. So they see that as a problem, and they feel that the bicep is tight, so they would think, oh, the key is that I need to stretch the bicep. But you must understand that it's not a flexibility issue. It's not that the bicep is innately tight. There's no such thing. What has happened is there's not enough force of the tricep to extend the elbow, which is what keeps the bicep long. Therefore, the bicep shortens. So the answer to sustaining the length of the bicep is not to stretch the bicep, it is to create an equivalent force in the opposite direction, which derives from strengthening the tricep. So this will sound a little bizarre to many people, but for me to develop flexibility for an individual, I do not promote stretching, I promote strengthening, but strengthening of the opposing muscle. So for instance, the big one that a lot of people talk about in the leg is the quadricep muscle, the front thigh muscle being shortened. When it's shortened, it can pull excessively on the kneecap or even at the top on the pelvis. It can lead to lower back pain or some sort of pain at the kneecap. So you might go, and there are certain philosophies out there, and they'll just say, well, the muscle's short, you need to stretch it. So they'll tell you, oh, stretch your quad, stretch your quad. That's the answer, stretch your quad. But stretching the quad can only create short-term increases of length. The thing that would happen would be at night, when there's no movement or blood flow into muscle to keep it warm, muscles will have a tendency to shorten back to the length that it most apt wants to be. So in this case, if there's no opposing hamstring strength, an equivalent force that creates a force in the opposite direction, the quad's going to shorten. So you could stretch it today, but tomorrow morning when you wake up, that stretch will have had no long-term value. You will be right back where you are. The quad muscle will be shortened. If it was creating lower back pain or knee pain, you will have the same exact pain. So the answer to resolving the shortening of the quad is not to stretch the quad, but to strengthen the hamstring. If you have a flexibility deficit, the only way to resolve that deficit is to correct the lack of opposing force of the shortened muscle. So in this case, we would strengthen the hamstring. With that understood, hopefully now people recognize that stretching is just short term. It will never create long-term lengthening of a muscle. If you stretch the muscle today, tomorrow, by the time you wake up, you will be right back at that shortened position. The only long-term resolution of a shortened muscle comes from strengthening of the opposing muscle. It is a force deficit that leads to shortening. All right? So that's the whole premise behind why stretching really has no long-term value. Let's just go on and see if we can answer some of these other questions. So when, how, and what to stretch when you should not stretch. Okay, so we talked about when you should stretch, and I'm not saying that you shouldn't stretch in the short term. If you're having some irritation during the course of a day and you want to try to get some short-term relief, by all means you can stretch, but let's be clear, tomorrow you're going to have to stretch again, tomorrow you're going to have to stretch again, tomorrow you're going to have to stretch again. You will never ever resolve the actual cause of the shortening. It'll give you some short-term relief, but you must, if you choose to stretch, do that in conjunction with the strengthening of the opposing muscle to get to the point where that muscle never shortens again, therefore never requiring stretching. There is a point at which you can reach where you would never have to stretch again. If you have full balance of your muscles, all your bicep, tricep, chest to back, all that stuff, then your joints will be maintained at their optimal position, your muscles will be maintained at their optimal length, and there would really be no long-term need for stretching again. So when, how to stretch, there's specific stretches for the pec. We could just put our elbows up on doors and lean through. For the quadricep muscle, that's one that's done so incorrectly. I guess I could just briefly describe that. The quadricep is probably one of the most stretched muscles, and so the average person grabs at the bottom of their foot near their toes, and they kind of try to pull their heel towards their butt, but they never really look at the position of the front thigh or the knee, and in most cases the knee is well in front of the hip joint while they're standing, and that's not how you stretch the quad. The quadricep muscle is made up of 4 components. The one that actually passes the hip joint is something called the rectus femoris muscle, and that's the part of the quad you're trying to stretch. So to do a proper quad stretch, first off, don't grab the foot, you grab it at the ankle. You must then begin to pull your heel back behind you, but you don't start pulling your heel towards your butt until you bring your knee at least 3 inches behind the hip joint. At that point, then you would begin to try to bring the heel towards the butt. That's the critical understanding of the quad stretch. And if you can't even initiate that, then I would be a little hesitant to try to even begin to stretch the quad. You got to have to come up with an alternative mechanism, which most likely would have to be with you laying down at an edge of a bed and your leg is hanging off, and you'd probably have to use a towel to begin to try to bring the heel towards the butt. So be very careful with that quad stretch. In terms of the hamstring, how to stretch, what to stretch, and when should you not stretch. So let's talk about that hamstring, the opposing muscle. For the vast majority of people, and I know lots of people have told me, oh, I've gone to the physical therapist or medical people, and they tell me my hamstring is short, and I need to stretch it. And I check these people out, and they're bringing their leg up, they're laying on their back, one knee is bent and the foot's on the floor, and they're trying to stretch the opposing hamstring. And that hamstring, they're bringing it almost to their nose. And they think that that's good. Remember what I said. People think that stretching is good regardless. Stretching is always good. Always stretch your muscle. That's a fallacy. Here's the reason. Because the length of the hamstring, the posterior thigh, should be maximal at 90-degree bend, a 90-degree angle between the torso and the thigh. If you go beyond that, you're actually creating hyperflexibility. The way you want to understand this, and it's going to get just a little bit technical, but I like laying things out so people could understand this. A muscle performs optimally, creates its optimal force at something known as its optimal length. And there is a chart, a graph that actually presents this called the length-tension ratio. And on the side of the graph, it shows force output, and on the bottom of it, it shows the length of the muscle. And what it says is that if a muscle is very short, it creates very little force. And as you lengthen the muscle, the force output gets maximal at its optimal length. And then as you lengthen it beyond its optimal length, it loses its ability to create force. So it's a bell curve. And what it's saying is whether a muscle is very shortened, and here's the part most people don't understand, or if it's severely lengthened, it loses its ability to create force. So here we have this person, and they're being told, stretch that hamstring, stretch that hamstring. And you've gotten to 90 degrees, and now you're going even further, and you're taking that ankle towards your nose. You don't recognize that you're actually making the muscle become even more hyper-flexible. And you're now on the right side of that bell curve. So the more that you're stretching it, the more you're weakening it. And I'm going to give you the classic example that shows what happens. And that's that baseball player who hits the ball and he's racing down to first base as fast as he can, and it's a close play, and he suddenly puts his foot out to try to reach for the bag, and he tears his hamstring. And everybody is under the impression, oh, the reason he tore his hamstring was because it was too shortened and he didn't stretch enough. That's the fallacy. That's the fallacy. It wasn't that it was too shortened, because this guy's quads was so strong in relationship with his hamstrings that if you had checked this guy, you would have seen that his quadriceps was excessively shortened, which would indicate that the force of the quad was greater than the hamstring. That's why the quadriceps shortened. Well, if the quadriceps shortens, what happens to the hamstring? It becomes elongated. So the length of his hamstring, if we had checked him, most likely the athletic trainer was overstretching it, and he was to the right side of the optimal force of that muscle. So in that respect, the more he was stretching it, the more he was losing the force output of the muscle. So when he went to reach out, what is the purpose of the hamstring in that action? It's to decelerate the leg after the quad kicked the leg out to reach. So the hamstring was trying to decelerate his leg, but because it was so lengthened, it didn't have the force. And he tears the hamstring. Why? Because it was hyper flexible. So ladies and gentlemen, when you, for now on, hear that there's never anything bad about stretching, that's your example to show you that's not true. More is not better. More is not better when you've reached the ultimate length of a muscle, the optimal length, which creates the optimal force of that muscle. If you go beyond that length, you are now leading to a lesser force output of the muscle. This is the classic example of that, the quad and the hamstring. So we talked about when to stretch, how to stretch, and when not to stretch. Okay? So the answer to when not to stretch is when a muscle can be shown to go, once it reaches its optimal length, and every muscle has an optimal length, once you get beyond that point, if you continue to stretch, you are feeding into the muscle weakening. So you no longer want to stretch beyond that point. And the most important one that everyone talks about is that hamstring. Do not stretch a hamstring beyond 90 degrees. Which is to say, if this is the torso and this is the thigh, you never go beyond that point. Okay? That's a biggie. How do you know when a muscle or tendon has been overstretched? So that question was just answered. If you can identify what the optimal length of the muscle is, and that's presented in any type of information, and if you want, you could always contact me, and I'll happy to discuss that with you. You can contact me at drmitch@mitchellyass.com, DRMITCH at MITCHELLYASS.com. Send me an email. Say you're questioning whether you know what the optimal length of a particular muscle is. You'd like to know, and I'll be happy to discuss that with you. So if you have that muscle go beyond its optimal length, you are now entering an area where you would no longer want to stretch. So do not stretch beyond that point. What happens when you stretch an already overstretched muscle, and what causes the muscle to become overstretched in the first place? So we talked about the reason that a muscle becomes overstretched is because the muscle on the opposite side has shortened severely. So if a muscle, let's say, for instance, the bicep shortens and you can't extend your elbow, that is telling you that the tricep is now overstretched because it's not able to obtain its optimal length. Okay? So in the case of the quad and hamstring, if the quad is severely shortened, by definition, the hamstring must be overstretched. So if you find any muscle is shortened, if you are concerned about the opposing muscle being overstretched, we need to lengthen them. We need to work on the muscle balance by strengthening the weakened muscle, which will allow the shortened muscle to achieve its optimal length and the overstretched muscle to achieve its optimal length. That's why muscle balance. People talk about getting stronger. I wouldn't care one iota how strong you are if you don't achieve muscle balance. If you're a person who loves to go to the gym and strengthen their pecs like it's out of style, and you end up with a severely forward shoulder posture because you never created the equivalent strength in the upper back, which is the opposing muscle group of the pecs, you've set yourself up for injury. You've now shortened your pec. And if, God forbid, something happens where that arm gets pulled behind you, you're going to tear your pec. Why? Because you were so conscious and so interested in developing strength, but you forgot about the idea of balance. Balance achieves the optimal length and optimal force of both muscles on either side. All right? What else? I think that's everything she discussed. She wanted me to discuss. So that should be a really nice summation of stretching. Again, just to reaffirm the positions, stretching is a short-term mechanism, not a long-term mechanism. Shortening occurs because not the muscle just intrinsically had a desire to shorten, but it will only shorten because its opposing muscle does not have enough force output equivalent to the shortening muscle. To achieve proper flexibility of muscle, you need to achieve balance of two opposing muscles. If there is a muscle that goes beyond its optimal length, then we do not want to try to stretch that muscle any further. We would want to strengthen it to sustain it from going beyond its optimal length. And again, don't think that strengthening is key in maximizing performance. Strengthening can only work effectively if it's being done in conjunction with balancing of muscle, bicep to tricep, quad to hamstring, chest to upper back. Let's make sure that if we decide to do strengthening, which you're talking to the king of people who want you to be strengthening to maximize your force outputs so they're greater than the force requirements of your activities, I want you to make sure that you're doing it in balance. Every muscle has an opposing muscle. We always make sure that as we're strengthening with equivalent forces. That's what's going to keep the position of the joint surfaces of every joint in optimal position. So 100% of the congruency of those joints and surfaces are taking 100% of the force through. By the way, that's how you prevent yourself from developing arthritis, herniated disc, stenosis, labral tears, all the things that are being found, by the way. There's a cause to all that stuff. It's weakness or imbalance. So if you want to prevent yourself from having any of those structural variations, sustain strength and balance, which keeps optimal position of joint surfaces. It achieves the optimal lengths of your muscles, so they're performing optimally, and that's how the body functions optimally. That's how you're going to prevent yourself from getting injured. Right? That's how you're going to have optimal performance. Do what you want when you want at the best way you can. All right. So hopefully, Vicki, you're going to see that. You're going to check it out. You're going to let me know if I achieved everything you wanted in the video. If you're not Vicki and you had some questions on stretching, hopefully this answered all your questions. If you do have questions further, if you want me to do a video about your particular issue, by all means, you can email me at drmitch@mitchellyass.com, DRMITCH at mitchellyass.com. I'll be happy to do a video for you. If you're having issues and you feel that now that you've got to know me a little bit better and what I'm saying makes a lot of sense compared to pretty much the entire medical establishment, and you'd like me to do a Zoom session or a Skype session with you, same thing. Contact me by email and we'll set something up, and we'll make sure that we use the Yass method, means of diagnosing through the presentation, the body's presentation of symptoms, to make sure that we can identify what tissue's in distress. In more than 99% of cases, it is muscle. That's not going to show up on a diagnostic test, and there is no medical specialty educated or trained to identify them. 98% of the cases, it's muscular. What does that tell you about the chances of misdiagnosis? Pretty big. So if you want to set up a Zoom Skype session, by all means, contact me, drmitch@mitchellyass.com. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. I don't think you can find anything else on the internet that is more complete in its presentation about stretching. When to do it, when not to do it, what it represents, what's a short muscle, why does the muscle shorten that you think you need to stretch. Hopefully you see that in this video. If you like my YouTube channel, Dr. Mitchell Yass, please subscribe so you can get notifications when these types of videos are coming out. I'm trying to put them out once every day, once every other day, something in that range. So you're getting a lot of applicable information, stuff to help you address your issues, understand what's causing them, and if they're muscular, how to resolve them. And sometimes I even go live on YouTube, and you'll be made aware of that. So for now, this is Dr. Mitchell Yass wishing you a pain-free, fully functional life. Bye-bye.